Now, can you imagine a mattress? You see, this is what I really want to do. I might actually do it. But a mattress that is full of rosemary. As opposed to the horsehair, it gets weaved with rosemary. So that, it might not be good for people who have got sensitivity. But there is this really strange study that was done. There's been many. But again, very fascinating. The starlings and types of bird, crows as well, I think are another, they will deliberately go and pick out herbs and weave these into their nests. And scientists looked at that many, many, many years ago, I think, and they were curious as to why do they do this. And it was found, so scientists being scientists, what's the reason for this? What happens if you remove it? And what they found was the ones that had it in had stronger immune systems. Did you know that? And the ones that didn't make it very old. And in nature, this is true. Not all of them are able to get hold of the rosemary. It's not overly common. It was, among other things as well. Rosemary is just one particular one out of many that the birds weave in. And this is a strange thing. Now, for a human standpoint, it might not boost immunity. It's possible that it could. But for me, rosemary seems to be the one that doesn't get any invading species on it. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, yeah.
That out of most of them, they're all wilting and they've got a lot of bugs on them. But rosemary, by and large, it doesn't. It might have a few bumblebees will hide in it. Now, if you think about this being weaved into the mattress, and it goes in sort of a cross stitch, you'd have to grow the rosemary quite long to do this. So, we're thinking along the lines of 6 foot, 4 foot, but it doesn't need to be 6 foot long. But to get it at least a decent 4 foot, 2 foot, or a foot, and weave it in between, weave it in between, weave it in between one way, and then weave it another way, and then put your padding on top. Now, what this can do is, for me, I love touching rosemary. I still smell of it. If I was a wild individual, I would seek out one of these hedges, if you like. I'd call it a hedge, and I would collect lots of this. And I would like to sleep in a living one, because I become covered in the scent, and I love it. I really do. I think it's beautiful. Now, every time you get on and off your bed or roll on it with it weaved inside your mattress, even with all of that, it will keep your bed, hopefully, extremely fresh, because you sweat.
Yeah.
Well, the rosemary, I think, will absorb your moisture. And over a period of time, this drying and dampening. We do this in mattresses anyway. And every time you move on it or you change your bed linen, as much as these products that we've got, these fabric softeners and everything else, they smell nice. But clean sheets, as well as that smell of rosemary every time you get into your bed, that would be awesome. And not just that, St. John's worts and stuff like this. I don't think we put enough, all that empty space inside that mattress. I know, yes, it's for springs. But to weave herbs in it so that it always remains fresh. The scent, the smell. Whew. Because, I don't know, you had that sock of lavender.
Yeah.
I had a sock of rosemary. And I put it in it was an old sock. I couldn't find the other one, so, what am I going to do with one sock? Not a lot. So I filled it with some rosemary and then stuck it in my sock drawer. And all my socks, I haven't done it since then, to be honest. I was moving one time, I don't know, and I lost it, I suppose is a way to say it. I think I found it and then, it got covered in dust and whatnot during the move. And when I did recover it, it was no good. But it still smelled for like many years afterwards. And what I found was it didn't smell initially, like I think I got used to it, but I could smell it. But then I sometimes had to squeeze it, and then it released it again, and then off we go. And I was just wondering that in a bed where you roll one way, roll the other, toss, turn, and you get this nice smell. And what's more, you smell of it. You'll smell of it. So if you haven't got time to get a shower in the morning, but you get one at night before you get into bed, you're going to be smelling extreme. Oh, what washing powder are you using? Actually, it's all natural. It's natural. If I could get that neat as it is, I would use that as a fabric center. You know, even putting it in little bags and putting it inside your wardrobe and that. Some people were using herbal tea, and I was like, man, have you ever heard of herbs? You know, why don't you go snip a load off a bush somewhere and bag it up in something? Yeah, it's wonderful. I love that. So all things like this, and I wonder, because, you know, I think that most humans get these allergies have increased because of how far away nature is. It's moving further and further away. You know, we're building cities and stuff like that. But this fascinating, you know, I think we were talking the last time I was here, there was no plants. And then I did a video, which I've got on an older hard drive. I was talking about it. Mm-hmm. I put it up on one of my YouTube accounts. I don't even know if I got that far. I think I did. And then all of a sudden, there was this thing called Wyndham in Bloom. Mm-hmm. It was like, you know, it was coincidence, I guess, that I started talking about this stuff back at Griffin. And then all of a sudden, the town just erupted in putting these plants out. But I think it was done through the council. Weird. I didn't put it towards the council. It was just, yeah. No, I thought I got heard. That's what I think, because, you know, I think the people at the college beside and the people down below, I think they heard me saying this. And then off it goes. Off it goes, because previous to that, where I got that knowledge from was I sat down and I was writing on Facebook. I believe it was Facebook, and I put this on public, where I was talking about that the more nature moves away, you know, because I did have a really bad problem with allergies at one stage, and although I still on and off got them, it's nowhere near as bad. But I got a load of plants, like it used to be really bad, and then I got some plants, and now that they're periodically flowering, literally quite a lot, some of them, and I noticed that the allergies sort of started subsiding, as opposed to not being around any flowers for most of the time, kind of avoiding it. And I found that when I was exposed to this sort of pollen, it irritated me far worse. And slowly but surely, I think I've gained tolerance again, just by having the plants around. So anyone that's got severe allergies, I wouldn't recommend you go and do it that way. I think you need to do it, introduce yourself to it bit by bit. But I think it's far worse if you keep away from it than, you know, being around it. And that's then when I was looking at cities, and then someone I knew had really bad allergies, but they always lived in a city, a big city. I asked them when they ever went out in nature. Well, of course, they said the blank statement. I think it was just, by this point, it was in high school and that, they said, oh, no, I don't. Did you used to when you were younger? Oh, yes, I did when I was younger. Did you have it then? Not really. A little. But then moved to the city and that, and then I think that we become forgetful sometimes that we are in this, and when you're in it, you build up tolerance. This is true with medication. You build up tolerance. Personally, you know, it would be ideal, just thinking out of the box here for a second, is if we had two types of painkillers. One, where you bounce on morphine and then you bounce onto something else. And then you bounce onto the morphine and bounce onto something else. This chop change may stop you from building up that tolerance to it. Rather, because I think it's, from what I understand from certain things, that people will stay on the one particular one, and when that stops working, then they move over to another one, and then when that one stops working. But some people can take it for longer periods than other people, and I've noticed that certain people have this high quick ability to have tolerance. Their tolerance builds up to it. It's almost like the body stops, you know, gets used to it, and then it's like, I found a way to get this out of the system quicker. So with these new type of mattresses, most certainly, you know, could this help to build up the tolerance to, like, hay fever, and we start seeing a reduction in hay fever? You know, it's got to be far more better than taking Piriton, and you might need to rely on that stuff when you get bitten by something, you know. But if you've built up a tolerance to it, that's not great. So this could eventually eliminate it. But yeah, the Wyndham in Bloom and Norwich in Bloom, I think this is a really good idea. Yeah, not because I was talking about it, but it didn't exist beforehand, and now it does, and that's. Do you see what I mean? That's a good step forwards, but I would go further than that because it's nice to walk past certain plants. There's that particular tree that we walk past, but it's a mixture. So you're like, oh, I really like. Oh, what's that smell? It smells really nice. And you grab the. Yeah, there's a sort of that smell to it, but it's also the pine resin. It's also the pine needles. We used to drink a lot of pine needle tea back in Mesolithic. You wouldn't believe how much they were chopping up these pine needles and just throwing that into some water and boiling it. It makes you wonder how they did that without pots. Weird. Yeah, I think they were using wood. Wood doesn't burn if you've got liquid inside it. It's interesting, and it will heat up enough, and then you just even you can do this in a scrape as well. Just have it in the scrape.
You don't have to put it directly on fire, but on something hot, like
Yeah,
hot stones or something like that.
exactly. Yeah, and then the fire burns under the stones. Yeah, there's a lot of this, but unfortunately, the thing that is, there's no proof to it. All I can do is show you this. I have shown you it with a few things that you can get the water to. You don't need it to boil. That's the thing. You need it to get hot enough in order for it to release the chemical property of the pine needles. That's all. And it doesn't need to be like overly hot. It doesn't need to boil. Depends where you are. Magnifying glass works just as well. But again, a container of liquid, even dropping hot rocks into it, a container that they've made, and they were very crafty, very very crafty. I mean, if you think about it, wood was easy, but these people were carving from bone and stone, and they were making it look like. If you've ever tried carving with wood, it's a mission until you get the hang of it. But when you get the hang of it, it's very easy. Imagine that after you've been carving into some stone and bone, they were making needles, sewing needles out of stone and bone.
Unbelievable how fine they were.
They were also combining wood and flint. They were grinding flint down into spikes, like teeth. They saw teeth of animals and knew that this would be very good because they watched the animals bite into the prey. And this is just how observant our ancestors were. That how observant those good those teeth were when they were observing an animal hunt. You see it when an animal hunts. I watch my cat hunt rabbits. Not enough rabbits in cat food. Farmers go absolutely mental about rabbits, right? Somewhere along the line, I agree and disagree, but still. And then they introduce this thing called myxomatosis. Now, whether that's man-made or not, I don't know. I've heard that it is. You would think that the farmers would get the rabbits in a humane way, enough as humane as possible. The RSPCA will let you know that. Odd, but then you could get these rabbits. It'd make great cat food. Just rabbit, just rabbit, nothing else. You don't need any of the chemicals and the artificial stuff that they put in it. They really do cheap down on food, and it makes you wonder about what are they doing to our food. But yeah, and this kind of keeps the numbers down on the rabbits eating the crop and different things like that. But it also helps give the cats a balanced and very decent diet. But anyway, getting back to that, when you notice a cat, I watch my cat, he loved rabbit, and he didn't hunt them by running. He sniffed the ground, and then there was this sort of, I don't know, you know how it is, rabbit make a trail in a hedge, or, the leafy matter or whatever. He goes, covered in fleas doing it, he goes beside that part where they run, and he sits in there and waits. I was just watching him one particular day. I had nothing else to do anyway. I was probably sketching and doing some ideas and writing some stuff as well. I was just observing him, and I was further enough away that he didn't see me. I was watching him, and I just wondered what he was doing, why he was picking this area. And then the rabbits, I saw them in the distance, and I thought, they're sure as hell going to figure him out that he's there. They didn't. They were coming down, and as soon as they got past where he was, I see him wiggling his ass like he does, and then, he got one. And he got a lot of these. So if I tried to put him on a diet, you know what? He wouldn't even eat tinned cat food. He'd go off and get his own. Just rabbit. He was always going for rabbit, and now he's a bit, he's a super senior. He's a bit, and then there's not much around here. you know, and if he's got a venture file, that's risk factor. But you know, trying to get hold of some rabbit for him is a nightmare. It's like 40 quid for legs. Do you get what I mean? And as much as I love my pets, then, you know, because that's another thing, as vets are very expensive for what they are. I find this very strange that it almost, in a good way, it's great to have them, but it's almost like using the love of an animal to put a high price on something. But when you watch them hunt and they get in with the mouth, because that's what he did, you know, paws and mouth, and he snapped straight on the, you know, as they do, and it was a bit heartbreaking at the same time, but it's wild thing. You're doing your thing, you know. It's a lot to watch that, but when you notice the teeth in that, that's the one thing I did notice. It was cool when he had it in his mouth and he come, you know, because he wants to come over and show you what he's just got, and he throw it around. I don't know why he does that. He'll throw it about before eating it. I don't know, whatever. It's a bit morbid and triggers for anyone that's, you know, but it's natural. It's what they do, and try and be the tree in that moment, as Tim would say. The event is just an event to the tree. What happened? Well, an event is just an event. A cat just ate a rabbit. The event is just an event. But getting back to that, and you see that the hunter-gatherers would have noticed this teeth action, which would have been very good at bringing down something, an animal. They would have put this fine... I don't know how to explain how they look. I got some over here. Maybe I've still got them out. That's the thing. Or did I clear them up? I did. I cleared them away. Where's that tray? It's here. It is here. So I didn't clear it up. Yeah. Anyway, let's have a look at this. How long do you think it would take someone to carve that out of... This is flint, by the way. Out of a piece of flint. Now, we know that they were making these things different for varying different reasons, but how long do you think it would take them to make something like that? And there are longer ones of these as well, couple of inches, depending on what they were going for. This into a piece of wood acts like the bite of an animal. It's crazy, right? And you know, I often thought that they were making these tools to build habitats, bring down trees, but the hunter-gatherers weren't really bringing down trees. They were collecting. Why bring down a tree when you can collect all the sticks around? Yes, when they got less and less and humans got more and more, then they're going to need to start bringing more down. But I think this was more for hunting. And before it was these, it was javels made out of wood. Javels. Very effective, especially with the flights. And then after a while, they got more intricate, especially with tools. And then we'll take the hammer, the stone hammer. This is a stone hammer. Can you believe that? Look at that. And it's amazing how you get the piece of wood to fit right in this part, and it adds so much so it doesn't slide. Easy for tying. It's hard to explain that. If you see it there, a piece of wood would sit there and it would take it. And what's more, you can also hammer these in. It's interesting, into pieces of wood. Again, could give you the first sort of nail. That is interesting. How strong these are. You would often think that these are quite brittle. No, because the wood holds it together. The more it's penetrating into something, it holds it together. So just by observing that, they then made teeth, which would have been pieces of wood with lots of these spikes on it. They either threw it or they'd hit something with it at close proximity. So being hidden. And that was far more likely to bring something down. Because humans don't really have much of a defense system or a system for bringing things down. Not really teeth, not really claws. And then there's a reason why that got turned off. And if you look on the end of here, I don't know if you can see it on the camera. If I try and get to the light, do you see those holes there? Those imprints, indentations on that? This stuff is freaking hard as anything. It fits those spikes, the end of those spikes. And you'd be surprised how you can hammer that in. It's very interesting. And I think they got a little bit more intricate. You know, before it would have just been spiked pieces of wood, to be honest. So, you know, javels and stuff like that with feathers on the end. And then they put these on the end, which much more easier for hemorrhaging. If they shot those javels into them, I don't think it would have brought it down. That it had to gone over and be a bit more brutal, but I think that they couldn't bring themselves to do it most of the time. Hence why the development of these. And it was the bow and arrow. So, yeah. But going back in time, if I was one of these, my favourite would be rosemary. And if I stunk of rosemary, would other animals smell me?
No.
They'd smell the rosemary. Therefore, I'd blend in. So, but yeah, and I just wonder whether this helps for immunity. What does it do for humans? You know, what does this do, bringing this in? So I'd like to try this in a bed. I'm gonna do it. There's no ifs or buts about it. I will do it, and then, yeah. Rosemary is my favourite. St. John's wort, that's another one. It's very nice. You know, because we're beyond the parts of rodents and stuff, and I've not really seen much rodents. They don't really take a fancy to it. Not always, even if it's dry. But imagine them if this was built into old houses. Because you notice some of these houses, the medieval ones, have a very signature smell to them.
Yes, they do.
Some of it's straw, some of it's reed.
Yeah.
But there's something else there.
Yeah.
I think it was herbs.
Yeah, I imagine them hanging in the kitchen probably.
Because rosemary breaks down into a fine powder.
Yeah.
It actually goes into a flour. Although not recommended to eat large amounts of it, of course. But, you know, adding this into some prehistoric plaster, let's say, their version of it, you know, I think that's what they were doing. That's why they had to have something to combat the smell, because they were using cow manure, weren't they? Certain manures they were adding into it, weren't they? You know, I think that they had to combat that somehow. And the fly ratio.
They lived with nature, they knew more of the benefits of variety of herbs, I think, and plants.
And then how does this work against fungus attack? How does this work against, you know, protection in the house, the oils in it, which go on to perhaps support the wood accidentally? Perhaps it wasn't done on purpose, or maybe there wasn't a lot of knowledge there. They knew what they were doing. They were very sophisticated. And to make things like that, sewing needles out of bone. Can you believe that? Sewing needles out of bone. I mean, do you know how long that takes? They must have had an art to it. You know,
sitting on it and like saying, okay, today I'm going to start, and maybe who knows when I'm going to.
So, and also out of flint. You can make them out of flint, as is proved here. And there are some shards that, but my word, that's an arsenal of knowledge. That's fascinating. That is, to me, that is something.
Chip them into
Yeah.
thin pieces and then decided this many needles might work from this.
You see these into a piece of wood. Do you know how you get the wood to hold it? You wet it, and then the wood expands. Then it holds onto a piece of this, and you can spearfish with it. It's illegal here in Britain to do that. Under certain circumstances, you can seek permission, I think. You have to get specialised permission. But that, especially if you, you didn't have the luxury of catching too many deer, which is the main thing on the diet, spearfishing was the next best thing. And this is why you'll commonly come across these broken in rivers. But you'll think that the rivers eroded that down. No, it hasn't. Nor these. No, these are tools. And if you can piece the pieces back together, you know, this is where they get it from. So you put this in a piece of wood, a branch or something like that. You really make sure you've got that nice. Stick this in the end of it and then wet it, and it will swell up around it. And as a result of that, if you put some flights on the end, which is feather, probably a few bluebell bulbs just to glue it down, and perhaps some sinew, you can catch fish with that. And, you know, to use antlers, antlers break. They do, when you go to use them for fish, they break very easily. This must have been easier to make, although it had its challenges. But even still, you have to carve the bone. But when you've exhausted all your bone, and they were perhaps not going for the deer all the time, they would have been very respectful. That's why we've got a lot of birds from Mesolithic till now. You think about that, they wouldn't take eggs unless there was a majority of them in the nest. And if one come across it after someone else had poached the eggs, they would respect that and leave it. You know, that's amazing, to be honest.
Yeah,
That
it's
respect there that they did have, that they knew that they could get something else. So there was a high level of respect in the animal kingdom because I think they knew that it was a cradle and it was sustaining them. And too much of eating a certain food, one particular food, made it disappear, which I think they would have known by trial and error. They would have eaten a lot of stuff and then been like, oh, it's gone. Oh, I don't like these ones. Well, tough, you're having it. Eat your roots. Do you get what I mean? And then perhaps they were like, oh. And when they found some, they were like, right, this time, we better leave a few. And then it's probably led on to farming. We should keep these, breed these, keep them close. You know, and then there's more to go around. Then there's that more respect. So, sophisticated is not the word for it. I mean, yes, modern days it's sophisticated, but in a different avenue. Back then, this was more sophisticated. You know, it's the same thing, but just change the...
They had good knowledge for health, for stuff around them, didn't they?
Yeah.
Herbs, plants, trees.
Absolutely, they knew more stuff that we could eat than we can now. But now it's all sugar, salt, chemical, and...
Yeah, what we could use for...
It was good after a war, perhaps, when food was scarce. It was probably great. Now, you know, that we can go back and look at these... Meadowsweet makes a great tea. Not everyone can have it because it's salicylic acid. But it's not just that. Pine needle. You know, it doesn't need any sugar. It's just literally that in a bag, water. Raspberry leaves. Blackberry leaves. A mixture of different leaves, and when you put them together, I mean, that meadowsweet. My word, it smells absolutely gorgeous. So I've been trying to find that everywhere. Never thought to look over there. Sage, thyme, rosemary, although in small doses. I mean, there's